Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest today is Kyle Petty. And if you know anything about racing, why, you would know who Kyle Petty is. He's a racer, and his dad's Richard Petty, and Lee Petty before that. And so they've been involved in racing forever. And Kyle, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me today.
Hey, I got a couple of questions, trivia questions for you. Let's see how you do on this one. Who won the first NASCAR race?
Ooh, the first NASCAR race and 49. I should know that. I should know it. My granddad was in that race.
Was he really?
Yep. They took the family car, or they borrowed a car from a guy. True story. They borrowed a car from a guy named Gilbert Good. My granddad wrecked it, and they had to bum a ride home because they couldn't drive the car that they drove to the racetrack home. I'm lost, man.
I'll help you out. His name was Jim Roper. Do you know where Jim was from?
Roper from Kansas City. He's from Kansas. He
was from Kansas. Down the road, we have the original trophy. Where we're filming this right now in our studio, you're inside the Kansas Auto Racing Museum. So our museum has the first NASCAR trophy. That's Jim Roper. And then we had the first NHRA championship trophy. That was Paul Flynn. So we have both of those.
No way. That all that means is when I hit the Kansas border, I can drive as fast as I want to because there's really good race car drivers from Kansas.
Well, I don't know about that, but you can take a shot at it. But next time you get to make one of your trips through Victory, you call them Victory trips?
Victory Junction. It's for the camp.
Victory Junction. Yeah. You've been to Kansas before with it, so the next time if you get a chance to make another one of those, well, we'll look forward to having you here.
Thank you very much.
So let me start with this book because it's a good one. It's a good one. Tell me, where'd the title come from? What made you come up with that?
Well, the title, and you see the guitar over my shoulders. I've played guitar, it feels like my entire life. I was very, very fortunate to grow up in racing. And the great country singer, Marty Robbins, drove a race car and sang. A lot of people have forgotten that, or a lot of people never knew it. That's a little piece of trivia you can throw out. In the late 60s, early 70s, and I would go with my dad to the racetrack, and Marty, sometimes we'd be at a hotel and he'd bring out his guitar and sit and sing, Big Iron on His Hip and El Paso, and sing those classic songs that were his. And I knew when I was 11 or 12, I want one of those boxes that make music. I want to learn how to play that. So, from the time I was 12, I played guitar and I wrote songs. And when you write a song, and the one thing that a songwriter will tell you, almost all songwriters and all people in the music business, is there's got to be a hook. There's got to be a hook that draw people in. And we came up with the title from the music side, because basically Swerve or Die from a race car driver is a hook. That's a hook. You look at that and you say, yeah, I know the Petty name. They drove race cars. Swerve or Die. Man, that's right in your face. So that's basically where the title came from. But as you read the book, you understand that it's really my life too, because there's moments in your life that you could lay down and not go forward, but you had to swerve, you had to keep going, you had to live, and that's really what the book is about, is how to continue. And I hope that's what people take from it a little bit.
Oh, I liked it. That's a good explanation for it. I like it. And you mentioned Marty Robbins. I got to race against Marty at Springfield, Missouri. And great guy. I didn't know him well enough to get up and go talk to him or anything, but just to say hi to him or something like that. But really, really nice guy. I love his music.
Yes.
And so
he was. Let me tell you. I'm going to tell you a story. So. He drove for a guy named Cotton Owens, which is a Hall of Famer, and a NASCAR Hall of Fame guy. And they went to Talladega one year, and we used to have to run these restrictor plates to make you run slow. Well, Marty took his off. They took Marty's off and sent him out there, and he was running with my dad and David Pearson and Kel Yarborough and Buddy Baker and all those guys. And when he come in, they were just in practice. When he came in, they were like, Marty, man, that was phenomenal. We didn't know you could go that fast. And he's like, man, I didn't know I could go that fast either. We just took the plate off. And they said, wait. What do you mean you took the plate off? He said, I just wanted to see what it was like to run with you guys just for a few laps. So he just did it. Even though it was illegal, it was against the rules. He just did it just to experience what it felt like to do that. in return, he took my dad and Bobby Allison, and I was with him that night, and Baker and all those guys, and took them to the Grand Ole Opry and the old Ryman Auditorium and brought them out on stage and introduced them all. And the stand on that center stage was his world. So that was that was a cool trade-off. You get to run 200 miles an hour at Talladega with Richard Petty, and then you get to bring Richard Petty up on stage at the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, I think that's an awfully good trade-out. That's fantastic. That's a good story. I'd had heard some of that, but I never heard the part about Richard and the rest of them going to be up on the stage up there. So that's awesome. We're going to cut away, take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're visiting with Kyle Petty. Welcome back. We're visiting with Kyle Petty, who's written the book Swerve or Die, and it's I've scanned through it, and it's absolutely excellent. You know, one of the things that all of us who do any writing know that, well, we're not gifted in the area of writing as much as somebody else, and you picked out Ellis Hennigan to write the book for you, which I know how this process worked. You probably recorded hours and hours and hours of tape or conversations with Ellis, but then he writes it. Man, you got a very talented guy writing for you. How'd all that come about?
So here's what happened. I mentioned music earlier. I get up most every day, work out. And I'll play guitar early in the morning. I've got 3 little boys. Overton is 4, Cotton is 2, and I've got a 2-month-old. So my wife gives me that time to kind of be by myself. And I was writing. Wrote a lot of songs. And my wife, as the pandemic started, people had always said, man, you need to write some of your stories down. You need to write some of your stories down. So as the pandemic started, I started writing a little bit. And I wrote 3 or 4 stories, and she read them, and she was like, they're good. Don't get me wrong. You don't know punctuation. You don't know how to spell. You don't know sentence structure. You don't know any of that. But the story is good. You know, it's here on the piece of paper. So she said, we need to find somebody. So Ellis had helped Michael Waltrip with his book In the Blink of an Eye. So I knew he knew something about racing. So that was an easy place to start. Didn't have to educate anybody. So I sent a bunch of stuff to Ellis, and he corrected it and sent it back. And then I wrote some more stuff, and then I sent it to him, and he corrected and sent it back. And then he said, well, where do you want this book to go? And I said, I don't know. Let's talk about it. So he and I got on the phone and talked, because we couldn't get together because of the pandemic. And we would spend time on the phone, and I would write something and send to him, and he would correct it, and he would write a little bit more, and he would send it to me, and I would correct it. And we just went back and forth. So really, in this case, it was a collaboration. A lot of times it's just somebody doing it or you doing it, but then this time it was a collaboration, and it was a lot of fun. And I said it. I will say I've said this before. There were parts of the book, you know, writing about Michael Waltrip, writing about my time with the Wood Brothers. You know, some of the funny things that happen with fans as you meet them across the country, because they're the greatest people in the world, man. They just love this sport. Some of that stuff was easy stuff. When I wrote about my Uncle Randy, who was killed when I was 14 at Talladega, when I had to write about Adam and my mom, that was a lot harder. And a lot of times I would tell Ellis, listen, I'm done. I'm done for the day. I'm done for the week. Don't call me back. Let's don't do anything. I'm going to have to find peace with this and find a good place. So a lot of that took time, and that was a lot harder, but you know, it came out really good. Ellis is a phenomenal writer, and a phenomenal person. He was from New Orleans, so he was from the South. So that helps a lot too. When you get somebody who kind of grew up with that Southern upbringing, that helped a lot too. So I was very, very pleased with the way it came out, and the people, my peers that have read it, have been very complimentary, and that's the main thing. If the people in racing like it, then that's what I care about.
You know, when we get to the end of our interview here, we'll put up on the screen where the viewers will be able to buy one of the books and enjoy it, because it's a good book. You did an awesome job with it, and I know that there's some things in there that were not easy to write, to go through, because they're a huge load. And you know, when you talk about, well, if you're okay with it, why, if you talk about Adam, there was a young man that had a ton of potential.
Yeah.
And for those who are watching this and they don't know what we're talking about, Adam was your only son at that time,
Yeah.
your only child.
Yeah.
And he was killed.
Yes.
Out on the racetrack.
Yes, sir. In 2000, in a practice accident at New Hampshire. And you talked about it in the beginning. My grandfather started in 49. My dad started in 58. I started in 79. And Adam came along in 98. And he was killed in 2000 in a practice accident. And did have tons of potential, tons of upside. He won a race there in I-70 Speedway in Kansas. So that was his only ASA win. That was a huge win for us, and huge win for us as a family. Won an ARCA race at Charlotte. Huge win. Got come close with a couple of Xfinity races and started his first Cup race at Texas, which was just a huge deal for NASCAR, a huge deal for us. 4 generations of Pettys had raced. And, when his accident happened, it stopped everything. It changes your world. As a parent, to lose a child, my heart goes out to every parent that has ever lost a child, because that's not a place that anybody ever wants to be or expects to be. It's so unexpected. It's not nature. You expect the old oak tree to die and the young oak tree to go on for a long, long time. And when the young oak tree dies, then it throws off the order of the world to you in a lot of ways. And you begin to question a lot of things. How does this work? Or is this right? Or what I've been taught. My grandmother, I mentioned my Uncle Randy, who was killed and when I was 14, my grandmother had taught us all when he was killed. He was her only son. She had 2 daughters and a little boy named Randy, and he was only 5 years older than me. He was more like my brother. And, she always told us, she said, you can choose to be bitter or you can choose to be blessed. And she chose to be blessed. And so it was incredibly easy for us and for me to choose to be blessed. I was blessed to have a little boy named Adam for 19 years, to watch him do what he wanted to do. And even in the hard times, my grandmother always said, just to open up the Bible, it's on one side of the page. It'll be on this side or on this side. You don't have to look. You don't have to thumb through it. You don't have to know everything about it. Just open it. Just open it up, and it'll be there somewhere. And when the times were hard, she's exactly right. That's the way it was. It was on one of those pages. I didn't have to read any farther. My answer was there. And, we built a camp in his honor. So many great things have happened from that one tragedy. And we have been an incredibly blessed family. Always, even in those times that were hard, we were blessed.
Yeah, and you had the right approach and still do have the right approach for it, because the Lord hasn't abandoned you, and you will see Adam again.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know yes, and it will be just like this. It will be, we feel like, boy, we're here a long time. I got gray hair now, so been here a long, long time. But in God's world, why, it's just boom. It's just like that. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Kyle Petty. We'll be right back. Welcome back to my interview with Kyle Petty, and Kyle's at his house. We're having a good conversation about life and his life. And Kyle, because you grew up with, of course, your dad and your grandfather, and they had a shop and building race cars and all of those things, and so you probably didn't get to do a lot of the other sports, the football, basketball, baseball, stuff like that, because this was not only your job, but it was your career, and that was your family. And is that pretty much the way that it grew up? You were geared towards racing.
Yeah, I tell people this is the way it is, or this is the way I grew up. I'm from rural North Carolina, and everyone that I went to school with, almost everyone that I went to school with, especially the people that lived out in the country, that lived away from the small town of Randleman. Randleman was a mill town, but everyone and the outskirts of that, we're all farmers, dairy farmers, chicken farmers at the time, tobacco farmers at the time. They were just farmers and farm families, and they were 3rd and 4th generation farm families. These are kids that grew up on the farm. They didn't do anything until they finished their farm work. When we used to do 2-a-days in football, and I played sports in high school, but when we did 2-a-days, we would go to the school, and all the players would get there, and our coach would say, okay, Kyle, you need to go with Phil because they're getting up hay today. So help them in the morning so we can have a practice in the afternoon. So we just went out and helped the other kids if you didn't have a farm. I like to think we had a farm. We just raised race cars on our farm. That's kind of what we did. But every weekend I was at a racetrack. When I was old enough to start working in the shop and told my dad I wanted to be a race car driver, he said, "You've got to work in every part of that shop all the time, or to learn how to build engines, how to do body work, how to weld, how to fabricate, how to be a mechanic." So I spent from the time I was probably in junior high all through high school until I was able to drive, working on race cars, being a pit crew member for my dad's team. So it's a way of life. It's not a job. It's a way of life. And you have to love it. You have to believe in it, and you have to love it. It's just like a farm, man. Sometimes you plant that crop and it doesn't come up, or sometimes you plant and you don't get rain and it doesn't yield what you want. But you know what? Next year you're out there planting again, because that's what you do. That's what your life is. That's what your passion is being on that farm and loving the land and loving doing the things you do. And that's kind of the way racing was. We go to the racetrack and crash and tear something up. That didn't keep us from coming back the next week. When Adam's accident happened, that didn't keep us from coming back the next week. That's just what we did as a family. So it was fun. I played sports, but mostly I just played at sports. To me, sports were a game. Okay. And I never dreamed or had aspirations to play baseball or football or basketball. All I ever wanted to do was be a race car driver. Just like all my friends, all they wanted to do was work on the farm and raise a family. And that's what I wanted to do.
When were you able to convince Richard that hey, let's put me in a car and let me go practice, let me go do something? Where was your first race at?
So this is the crazy part about growing up in my family. We had cup cars. You talked a minute ago about driving that division, coming to North Wilkesboro and running your division. And then there was the Busch series, and there was late model local cars, and there were truck series. So my dad, we had cup cars. So when I got ready to race, my dad's opinion was I should just run cup cars. I finally talked him into it by the time I was 18. First, he said 21. My whole life, he had said 21. And finally, he relented at 18. And the first race, I ran an ARCA race, which is a lesser division. But I ran one ARCA race. And the first one I ran was at Daytona.
200 lapper.
To the biggest place, to the biggest racetrack, to the fastest speeds. They're like, if you're going to learn, you might as well jump in the deep end and go off the high dive all at the same time. So that's where I went. And it was an adventure. I will say that. And then the next week, my dad won the Daytona 500. So it is, and I talk about peaks and valleys. That is a peak. That is a huge, huge, huge moment in our family and in my life, to be able to win a race one week in my car, and then to watch him win a race in a car that I helped build the next week, because I take as much pride in building those cars and in working on them as you did in driving them.
Well, Kyle, that's really interesting, because I raced at Daytona, and I had been racing forever. I was an old man when I went down to Daytona and raced in the Dash Series. You raced in the ARCA 200 and won your first race. And, when I got down there on that 2.5 mile track, and the banking I understood, but the 2.5 miles was something entirely different for me. And so I was pretty apprehensive about, okay, how am I going to do this? How does this work? And for you to jump into a car and go and run 200 laps and win the ARCA race, that's absolutely amazing, with no racing experience, because I'd been racing everywhere, but smaller tracks. Richard certainly knew what he was talking about.
I'm not sure he knew what he was talking about. Okay, so let's just be totally honest. I wasn't apprehensive because I was 18. You know what I mean? And you know how when you're 18, man, if somebody said, "Come on with me, we're going to Daytona," you're 18 years old, I'm going to put you in this thing. You can go run 190, 200 miles an hour. You're going to say, double thumbs up. I'm with you. I'm ready. This is something I've always wanted. And I think that's the deal. If he had taken me there at 45, I'm like, no, I'm out, dude. I'm out. You go somewhere else. There's no way, because I think your brain kicks in at that point in time. When you're 18, man, you're invincible. And listen, I wanted to be like my dad, and he went and did it. And I had watched him do it so many times that you just felt like you knew the rhythm. You knew how it worked. And funny story is, he took me out, put me in the floorboard of the car. These cars didn't have seats in them. You know how your car was. just a floorboard. He threw a car cover in, put me in the car. He put on a helmet, put on his goggles, strapped in. We went out and we're riding around the racetrack, and he's like, you want to run up here? You don't want to run down there. It's real bumpy down on the bottom of the racetrack. And he's driving and pointing and talking all at the same time. We run 193 miles an hour with him strapped in with a helmet, talking to me while I'm just sitting in the right side, hanging onto the roll bars, trying not to get thrown out the window. That's kind of the way it was. And then when we came in, he takes off his helmet and he says, okay, here you go. Your turn. You go out and do it. And listen, I was lucky to run 150 my first time out. But I've never looked back since that moment. It was a great moment in my life.
Awesome. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Kyle Petty. Welcome back. We're visiting with Kyle Petty. As you're looking at the screen while Kyle's at his house, you can see that guitar over his left shoulder back there. And what an amazing story you have had. How's your dad doing?
My dad's really good. He is 85 years old. And we talked earlier about my granddad running that first race and Jim Roper winning and 49. My dad was 13 years old, and he was at that race with my grandmother and my Uncle Maurice and my granddad, and a couple guys went together. And, every race, every weekend, he's still there. He's 85 years old, and he still goes to the Cup races. He's got a team. Petty GMS, Eric Jones drives for him. Noah Gregson's going to drive for him next year. But listen, a race without Richard Petty is a sad day when he doesn't show up, because he still loves it just like he did when he was a 13-year-old boy, and he's healthy and he's still there every week.
Are you running Petty Enterprises now?
Nope, I run my mouth on TV. I do analysis for NBC Sports. We do a Motor Mouth show. I do pre-race and post-race with Dale Jarrett, another great family name, and the sport, and Dale Jr., Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte, guys like that. So I'm just having a lot of fun watching and talking about it, and it keeps me involved. And you know how it is. Racing's a funny sport, man. You can't get away from it.
And I have seen you and heard you on, of course, television. You do an awesome job. Kyle, thank you so much for taking time to visit with us today. God bless you.
God bless you, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.